This is the most beautiful woman in the village, Adanna, and you won't believe what happened to her because she wanted to marry a rich man. The terrible spirits she encountered and how it altered her life forever will teach you a valuable lesson. In the heart of the lush and vibrant village of Ula, there lived a young woman named Adanna. Known far and wide for her stunning beauty, Adanna was the envy of every maiden and the desire of every suitor. Despite her humble background, she dreamt of a life filled with luxury and wealth. Her parents, loving and wise, often cautioned her to value the simple joys of life, but Adanna's heart was set on achieving her dreams of grandeur. One day, a handsome and charming merchant named Chijioke arrived in Ula. The villagers talked among themselves about this new arrival, noting how he spent money carelessly and seemed to have an endless supply of wealth. Chijioke wore fine clothes made of rich fabrics adorned with intricate patterns and jewels. He rode into the village on a beautifully adorned horse, further emphasizing his status. The whispers about Chijioke's lavish lifestyle reached Adanna's ears, and captivated by the rumors, she decided to go to one of his parties to see if they were true. Adanna's parents caught her sneaking out to go to the party and asked where she was going. Her father spoke gently but firmly. "Don't be deceived by things that are too good to be true, Adanna. Please don't go." Ignoring their warnings, she went to the party and saw Chijioke's extravagant displays of wealth, confirming the rumors. Adanna was mesmerized and determined to win his affection. Chijioke quickly noticed Adanna and was captivated by her beauty. He approached her with a charming smile and invited her to dance. As they danced, he flattered her with compliments and made grand promises about the life they could have together. Chijioke spoke of his luxurious mansion in the city, the lavish parties they would host, and the travels they would embark on. Adanna, enthralled by his charm and the intoxicating allure of wealth, felt herself being swept off her feet. Every word Chijioke spoke seemed like a dream come true, and she found herself falling for him more and more with each passing moment. The night was filled with laughter, music, and the glitter of lanterns. Adanna felt as if she were living in a fairy tale. When the party finally began to wind down, Chijioke walked her home, holding her hand gently. He spoke in hushed tones about how special she was to him and how he couldn't wait to see her again. With a lingering gaze and a soft good night, Chijioke left Adanna at her doorstep, her heart fluttering with excitement and anticipation. When Adanna entered her home, she found her parents awake, waiting for her. Their faces were etched with worry and anger. "Where have you been?" her mother demanded, her voice trembling with concern. "We were worried sick." Adanna, still on a high from the night's events, tried to explain, but her father cut her off. "You don't even know this man, Adanna. How could you be so reckless?" The argument that ensued lasted all night, with Adanna defending Chijioke and her parents voicing their fears and doubts. The house was filled with raised voices and tears, each side standing firm in their beliefs. Despite the growing excitement, Adanna's mother remained skeptical. She observed the whirlwind nature of their romance with caution, feeling that Chijioke's rush was a red flag. She often pulled Adanna aside, urging her to slow down and consider the possibility that things might be too good to be true. Adanna, however, was swept up in the fantasy Chijioke had painted for her and reassured her mother that everything would be fine. One day, Chijioke arranged a special date and took Adanna to a beautiful spot overlooking the village. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the landscape, Chijioke got down on one knee and proposed. He presented her with a dazzling ring, and his eyes shone with sincerity as he asked her to be his wife. Overwhelmed with joy, Adanna accepted without hesitation. Chijioke then announced their engagement to the entire village, further solidifying his commitment in the eyes of the villagers. The village buzzed with anticipation, and many were impressed and envious of Adanna's upcoming marriage. Adanna threw herself into the preparations, choosing the finest materials for her wedding dress, selecting the most beautiful decorations, and planning an elaborate feast. She relished every moment, feeling like she was living a dream. The day of the wedding arrived, and it was the most extravagant event the village had ever seen. Adanna, dressed in the finest silks and adorned with precious jewels, felt like a queen. The ceremony was grand, with colorful flowers and elegant arches adorning the venue. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and laughter filling the air. After the wedding, Chijioke and Adanna had planned to move to his hometown immediately. However, Adanna wanted to stay in her village for a bit longer so Chijioke could really get to know her family. She hoped they could spend time together and ease her family's worries. Chijioke, however, was adamant about returning to his home city. "I have important work to attend to," he explained. "We can't afford to delay." Reluctantly, Adanna agreed, feeling a twinge of unease at his urgency. Once they arrived at the mansion, any unease Adanna felt was overshadowed by her joy at her new home. The mansion was a stunning sight, with tall, ornate gates, lush gardens, and a facade that gleamed in the sunlight. Inside, every room was filled with beautiful decorations, expensive furniture, and luxurious fabrics. The floors were polished to a shine, and the walls were adorned with intricate tapestries and artwork. There were grand chandeliers hanging from the ceilings, casting a warm, inviting glow throughout the halls. Adanna felt like she was in a fairy tale. She loved everything about her new home, from the lavish bedrooms to the sprawling gardens. When she would look out the window and see villagers passing by, their eyes wide with awe and envy, she felt a thrill of pride. She loved the attention and the way people talked about her newfound status. Adanna was on top of the world and couldn't believe she now had the life she had always dreamed of. She finally felt as if her wishes had come true, and she had true wealth now. Despite her happiness, Chijioke's busy schedule kept him away often. Adanna tried to spend time with her new husband and have him show her around, but he was always so busy and almost paid her no mind. He would often disappear into his study or leave the mansion for days without explanation. When he was at home, Adanna would often overhear him speaking in rooms with no one else in them. The hushed tones and secretive conversations added to her growing sense of unease. But she tried to dismiss her concerns, focusing instead on the joy of her new life. With Chijioke frequently absent, Adanna decided to explore the mansion on her own. She wandered through the vast halls, marveling at the grandeur and beauty of each room. Some of the rooms were filled with exquisite art and sculptures, but as she delved deeper into the mansion, she encountered bizarre and unsettling pieces. The art depicted questionable things and acts, and many of the artifacts and weapons seemed dated and old. There were old spiritual artifacts and relics that gave her an uneasy feeling, almost as if they were watching her. Despite the eerie sensation, Adanna tried to focus on the positive aspects of her new life. She continued to enjoy the luxuries of the mansion, exploring its many rooms and spending time in the beautiful gardens. However, the sense of unease never completely left her. With her husband always coming and going, sometimes being there and sometimes not, Adanna decided to try and speak with the servants. Adanna tried to strike up conversations with the servants, hoping to learn more about her new home. Some of them spoke to her, sharing light-hearted stories and daily activities, while others did not say much but were always polite. It was as if they were fearful of saying something they shouldn't. It was during these interactions that she met Ebele. Ebele, a kind and wise older woman, seemed different from the other servants. She was calm and compassionate, offering Adanna a sense of comfort and security. They would often sit by the fire in the evenings, and Ebele would tell Adanna about the history of the mansion and its previous occupants. Ebele shared stories of the mansion's past grandeur and the families that had lived there before, hinting at the dark secrets that lay within its walls. Although Ebele hinted at dark secrets within the mansion, fear prevented her from speaking openly. As time passed, Adanna began to experience strange things that made her question the safety and sanctity of her new home. Shadows seemed to move on their own, darting across the walls in her peripheral vision. She often felt like she was being watched, not just by the old portraits that adorned the walls, but by something unseen and malevolent. Sometimes she would hear faint whispers, indistinct and haunting, that seemed to come from the very walls of the mansion. One night, as she was preparing for bed, Adanna noticed the temperature in her room drop suddenly. She shivered, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. As she glanced around the room, she saw a faint mist creeping in from under the door, adding to the chilling atmosphere. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if something terrible was about to happen. She called out for Chijioke, who came rushing into the room, surprised to see the mist. "I'll go check it out," Chijioke said, grabbing a coat and heading outside. Adanna listened as the door creaked open, followed by the sound of hushed whispers. The minutes dragged on, and slowly the room began to warm up again, the mist dissipating. Chijioke returned, looking a bit flustered but composed. "It was nothing," he said, "just some strange weather. Everything is fine now." Another day, while exploring the library, Adanna found a book that seemed out of place. It was ancient and worn, its pages yellowed with age. As she opened it, she felt a rush of cold air and heard a distant eerie wail. Just as she was about to turn the first page, Chijioke appeared behind her and quickly grabbed the book from her hands, closing it before she could read any further. "Ah, I've been looking for this," he said, his voice startling her. "I need it urgently for my work. Do you mind if I take it?" His eyes were intense as he held the book tightly. Adanna nodded, her heart pounding as he walked away with the book. Alarmed by all the strange happenings, Adanna spoke to Ebele about it, trying to get answers. Ebele listened intently, her face growing more serious with each passing story. "There are things in this house, dark things, that are best left undisturbed," Ebele said, her voice filled with concern. Despite her fear, Ebele promised to help Adanna uncover the truth. Their bond grew stronger as they worked together. Adanna found solace in Ebele's wisdom and strength, and Ebele was touched by Adanna's determination and courage. They spent more time together, and Adanna began to rely on Ebele not just as a servant, but as a trusted friend and confidant. They would often discuss their findings late into the night, Ebele sharing her knowledge and Adanna piecing together the clues. Determined to find answers, Adanna decided to explore the mansion further, searching for clues about its mysterious past. One day, while her husband was away, she spent hours in the mansion's many rooms, inspecting the artifacts and weapons. As she examined a particularly ancient-looking weapon, she noticed some inscriptions etched into its surface. Out of curiosity, she said the words aloud. To her astonishment, she heard the sound of bricks moving. She turned around and saw a hidden passage opening in the wall. Her heart pounded as she opened the door and found a narrow staircase leading down into the depths of the mansion. Each step echoed in the silence, heightening her sense of dread. The wall she opened closed behind her, sealing her inside. The The staircase seemed to go on forever, but finally she reached the bottom and found herself in a hidden room. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay, and the dim light revealed rows of shelves filled with strange, ancient artifacts. In the center of the room was a large, ornate mirror, its surface tarnished with age. As Adanna explored the room, she discovered more about the mansion's dark history. The letters and documents she found revealed that many men had died building the mansion, their lives sacrificed for its grandeur. But that wasn't all. Inside this room were doors that led down long, seemingly endless corridors, all with faint red glows at the end of each of them. Adanna's unease grew, but her curiosity drove her forward. She decided to walk down one of the pathways. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, the red glow growing brighter as she walked. Finally, she arrived in a small room filled with altars and pictures of other women sitting on them. Each altar was adorned with strange symbols and offerings, and the faces of the women in the pictures looked hauntingly familiar. Adanna's heart raced as she hurried back to the center of the room, still confused and frightened by what she had seen. Determined to find answers, Adanna chose another corridor directly in front of her. This pathway was windy, with other alternating paths branching off. After what felt like an eternity, she arrived in a massive room filled with a giant stockpile of gold and riches. The dim red light cast eerie shadows over the piles of money, stacked higher than she could imagine. The room was impossibly large, far too big to be under the mansion. Smaller rooms branched off from this main chamber. Intrigued and horrified, Adanna walked into one of the smaller rooms. She found a mix of things: studies with desks covered in ancient manuscripts, alchemy stations with bubbling potions, and a giant library filled with books that looked like the one Chijioke had snatched from her earlier. Each room seemed to hold more secrets, each more sinister than the last. In the library, Adanna noticed a book that stood out. Its cover was adorned with a symbol she had seen in the hidden room. She opened it and began to read, discovering that it detailed rituals and sacrifices. The book described how Chijioke had used dark magic and malevolent spirits to acquire his wealth, sacrificing innocent lives to maintain his fortune. The further she read, the more horrified she became. The rituals were graphic and cruel, involving the blood of the innocent and the destruction of souls. Just as Adanna was about to grab one of these books to learn more, she heard footsteps growing in the distance. In a panic, she tried to find a place to hide, only for Chijioke to come down and grab some books. He didn't suspect anything at all and grabbed items from another room. She heard bottles clanging, assuming he was in the alchemy room. Her heart was beating out of her chest when she was in her hiding spot and needed to do something. That concludes part 1 of Adanna's story. Please comment and subscribe for part 2 to find out what happens next in this tale of love, betrayal, and dark secrets.